Hello and welcome back. Today we discuss about Vairagya. Vairagya or dispassion is a state of being connected in actions, efforts, yet detached from its results, effects. This virtue inspires the spiritual aspirant to bring his best skills, talent, and commitment in his actions, yet ensure that the aspirant is not consumed by the results or effects from his efforts. The word dispassion doesn't mean absence of passion. It is actually the presence of strong enthusiasm and commitment towards our efforts, but without the feverishness, the restlessness towards the results. Let us look at how Maharishi Patanjali describes and defines Vairagya in the Yoga Sutras. Verse 12, chapter 1, Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali has introduced two important concepts, Abhyasa practice and Vairagya dispassion, non-attachment. Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam tannirodha. Patanjali has emphasized Abhyasa practice as a non-negotiable pathway towards excellence. This regular Abhyasa, when performed, has a downside. It can make the practitioner egoistic. As he gains more mastery, the ego begins to rise within him. I am this illustrious student. I am excelling at this practice. I am going to be a master in this field. This ego-centered mindset can be very damaging to the overall progress of this student. The best antidote to the toxicity of ego is Vairagya. Our interactions with the material world and the efforts involved therein invariably bring about effects and results. These results could be both positive, like receiving accolades, compliments, great fame and popularity, or be negative, to draw criticism from the world. A common analogy to describe this involves the life of a swan. This beautiful, graceful, white-feathered bird, usually found in marshes, lakes, and feeds off of fish and other aquatic life. The water-repellent feathers ensure the dirt in the swampy waters fail to dirty the feathers of the swan. A yogi similarly stays functional in his natural environment, yet develops the detachment from the effects, results of his association. Let us look at this with another example. A highly skilled surgeon works long hours at an emergency room, tending to patients with all sorts of ailments, cuts, injuries, wounds, etc. His intervention is highly valued and results in saving lives and enhancing the lives of multitudes of people in his community. His patients and their family love him for his valuable contributions in saving lives. His hard work and commitment towards his profession is highly valued. The surgeon incorporates Vairagya by being untouched by the accolades, compliments from his colleagues, patients, their families, not being depressed by the unpleasantness of the diseases, ailments, cuts, injuries that he witnesses on a regular basis, not being negatively impacted by any losses or deaths that he may witness under his watch. Vairagya is the delicate balance between connection with the material world, yet staying detached from the results of our efforts. Common men and women can readily relate to Viveka being the best in the world. A small compliment or recognition for our work can get into our minds and begin to alter our perception of who we are. Our egos become bloated, our perceptions and relationships begin to shift, and slowly people will see us in a very different light. Chapter 1, verse 15, Maharishi Patanjali delves deeper into the concept of Vairagya. Here he is defining Vairagya in detail. Drashta anushravika vishaya vitrushnasya vashikara sangya vairagyam. Let us split this long verse into its components. Drashta, objects that are seen visually. Anushravika, objects that are heard auditorially. Vishaya, subjects, topics, phenomenon. Vitrushnasya, without thirst, feverishness, obsession. Vashikara, gain mastery, exercise full control of. Sangya, comprehension. Vairagyam, non-attachment, dispassion. Vairagyam, non-attachment or dispassion, is different from detachment. In detachment, there was some attachment, and then by effort, one has detached away from it. Non-attachment is when there was never any attachment to objects of desire. Similarly, dispassion is not the absence of passion, but not being consumed by the fire of passion. Vairagya is defined as a state where the practitioner has skillfully mastered over his feverishness, cravings over objects of desire. The practitioner stays balanced, centered, even amongst temptations, sensory overindulgence. If one is living in the material world, there is always the presence of beautiful things to see, hear, taste, touch, smell. One key aspect to be highlighted in this verse implicitly does not discourage or require staying away or retreating away from objects of the material world. It does not imply one should not see, one should not hear, one should not experience sensory experiences, but have clear mastery over the senses and understand the limitation of the senses. Sensory experience can be enjoyed without becoming indulgent, consumed, addicted, or obsessed by them. Vairagya plays a key role in the spiritual evolution of the practitioner and thereby finds mention in the sadhana chatushtaya, the 4 pillars of knowledge for the seeker. What is the benefit from Vairagya, dispassion? Chapter 3, verse 51, Maharshi Patanjali continues, Tad Vairagyadapi dosha bija kshaye kaivalyam. Tad, it's that. Vairagya, dispassion, non-attachment. Api, also. Dosha, imperfections, flaws. Bija, seed, root or source. Kshaye, kshaye is dwindling, decreasing, wither. Kaivalyam, liberation. With Vairagya, the seeker has strived to conquer, gain mastery over his senses, and exercise full control over his cravings, aversions. With this great achievement, the seeker now has begun to wither away the very seeds of imperfection, flaws within himself. He has reached a significant milestone to purify himself and is closer to experiencing the oneness of Kaivalya, liberation. I hope this content was beneficial to you. Thank you for watching this video. Please do like, share your comments, subscribe for more content like this.